Hi, my name is Andy Cease, Director of Product Marketing here at Entrust, and I'm joined today by Aaron Kress, Director of Global Payments and Strategy at IDC. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Today, and yesterday, I think we've heard a lot about eKYCs, and it seems we're hearing a more integrated story when it comes to eKYC, AML, really that broader onboarding phase, ultimately driving to the debit card, that first point of value. And I'm just curious, looking to 2024, what are you seeing in the marketplace when it comes to that retail banking relationship?
I mean, it's great that you brought up eKYC. I mean, I think that's a very important topic to get at. And I think we're getting to a point where data access is really enabling a much more streamlined process than we've ever had before. We're not dependent on the established data aggregators anymore. We're able to aggregate our own data now through better access through certain types of open banking technologies, for example, to have really good permissioned data, as well as additional technologies that you layer on top of that. Things like document verification, liveness detection, which I think is also very important when we're talking about artificial intelligence and how that plays really against banks as opposed to for them.
Right. Yeah, the double-edged sword of artificial intelligence. I mean, certainly applications that the financial institution can employ to help, but of course, bad actors are also leveraging many of those same technologies. When you're looking at that account opening, what are some of the more interesting developments or innovations in that space?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I think is really important is, and it's more of an overarching concept in banking, is the transition to real time.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've had real time payments for a while, but I say we're seeing a real sort of catalyst moment with the launch of FedNow. And what that enables is real time funding of accounts. So now you have a situation where you could have a customer come into a bank, fully fund an account in real time, and leave with credentials to make a transaction. And as you know, that time to first transaction is absolutely critical to establishing the relationship and creating a long-term one.
Yeah, in many ways, it's that first milestone that a bank or a credit union is measuring themselves on, because that's really the first point of value for the consumer, as well as the first point of value really meaningfully for that financial institution.
Yeah, and even backing up a little, when we think about the application of artificial intelligence, and I'm not talking about ChatGPT, right? This is really well-proven artificial intelligence technology for fraud prevention. And that's really important because we're talking about real-time funding and real-time usage. You need real-time information that's incredibly accurate in order to feel confident that you've opened an account for who you opened it for the right reasons.
Right, exactly. And so we've certainly seen, I think you and I both have talked with customers and banks and credit unions in the space, and we've seen a lot of focus on that digital onboarding, specifically through the mobile application. But we're seeing in the data, and we're hearing from our customers, that as the consumer matures through that financial relationship, they're actually accessing a variety of channels. I'm curious to hear from you, how is that consumer working from what is now largely a digital opening, but sort of accessing the services that are ultimately omni-channel?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a real proliferation of, let's call them form factors, right? So, I mean, you've still got physical cards. They're an important part of the ecosystem and aren't going away, but you've got digital cards, you've got digital wallets, which are not necessarily card related, but are very, very connected to the bank account more than ever, I'd say. And those are being used in every environment. They're being used at point of sale, they're being used online, and they're being used in multi-touch point transactions. Buy online, pick up in store, buy in store, have delivered, right? And that's a really significant challenge both for the retailer and for the bank to understand what is this behavior of our, and kind of getting back to that fraud prevention conversation. These are new behaviors, and understanding what is an anomalous new behavior is really critical.
So you mentioned open banking earlier, and I think it's something that we're seeing develop much faster in Europe, largely the EU jurisdiction. But I'm curious, what excites you about open banking becoming more prevalent here in the United States? What are some of the first meaningful touch points that consumers are going to benefit from in this open banking ecosystem?
I think one of the most important things is the ability to see across your universe of accounts. Right? And I'm like, this is something I take advantage of regularly, right? The ability to, in one place that is your bank, that is not a third party, to really get access to your data. I mean, ultimately what drives open banking is the concept that it's your data and you have the right to see it in any environment that you want. Right? So I think that's something that's really important. So one of the things that I also think is interesting is, I mean, you mentioned open banking in Europe, and that is driven by regulatory requirements, right? It's the idea was that consumers need to have access to their data. Here in the US, it's not being mandated, but I think banks are understanding that giving consumers access to their data is not only good for the customers, it's good for the banks, because now banks can do things like verify accounts much more readily and with a much greater reach than they ever could before. And that has implications across, not just funding, but with risk.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, ultimately, banking is a risk management business. And the more data you have that you can apply towards that risk management problem, the better it is. And so I'm frankly, a little surprised, but very pleased that open banking and open banking type data access is really proliferating and giving access to a lot more data and a lot more use cases for that data to smooth the whole banking process.
Absolutely. And my last question would be, we've talked a lot about sort of this explosion of capability, opportunity, if you will, that financial institutions now have in this increasingly connected, more digital world. I'm curious, have you observed, best practices for a financial institution, working through their digital transformation? They're obviously working with potentially many more providers today. What are some of the strategies they're using to not only bring some of this great capability, but do so in a way that's sustainable for the back of house?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things that are important to talk about there is, and I don't mean to get into technical weeds, but the concept of API access to everything in the bank, right? Which enables some real interesting innovation and integration among the functions and among third parties. And to the point of those third parties, I think you've got a lot more innovation, which we're seeing all around the hall here today, and options for banks to choose partners that have a really great reach in terms of their functionality and their capabilities to help banks really do some innovative things and keep ahead of the curve. Right. There's no reason for a bank to just go, oh, that's technology, that's hard. Right. We don't want to do that, right? There are partnerships that they can form with vendors like Entrust that can really help them accelerate their digital transformation and move themselves into a world where they can serve a digital-first customer.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Aaron.
It's my pleasure. I had a great time.
Thank you for joining us here on the floor of Money 2020-2023. We look forward to joining you here next year, and have a great rest of your show, Aaron.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Thank you.